Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Friday, August 14th, 2026, episode 573, and we're going to talk about the suicide attempts on the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier that's stationed off of Iran. So there's and it's actually hitting the major airways how there are suicide attempts on the USS Abraham Lincoln because of the super long deployment. I believe the Gerald Ford had a longer deployment, but they were at least able to make several ports of call where sailors get to go on liberty, where they get to get off the ship and walk on dry land for like a day or two. And on top of the fact that they are stuck on the aircraft carrier and for 260 days or something like this, 9 months. But the food is also really, really bad. And pictures are being circulated of just how bad the chow or the food is for the enlisted. Apparently, the officers are eating well or a lot better, but the enlisted, all of the sailors, have a lot of bad food. And apparently, Pete Hegseth is saying that it's all fake news. But Larry Johnson also, he has been saying for weeks that the rumors about the bad food on these ships is not fake. That he's had mothers of sailors come up to him and show him pictures of their children, sailors, uh, in their family who pictures of them before deployment and then after deployment, and some of them losing 30 pounds because the food is just so bad. So apparently it's not just that it's bad tasting, but it's rationed because there's a shortage of food. They can't feed them the number of calories that they would need to in order to maintain their body weight. And I've watched documentaries on aircraft carriers. I have this fascination with all things military. I said on earlier episodes that I always wanted to go military, and my father would always say, "No, you are supposed to be doing other things and like podcasting, I guess, but actually becoming an instructor, like in a university level, or being a pastor." And and so military was not supposed to be on my list of life goals. But in any case, I still maintain a fascination on all things military. And so I watched an aircraft carrier documentary, and living conditions are not really that great. In other words, when air jets are taking off and landing, the sounds rumble through the entire ship. So it's hard to have so-called peace and quiet on a ship. And a lot of the enlisted apparently are quartered, they sleep under the catapults where the ships are, where the planes are basically catapulted off of the aircraft carrier. And so it's a lot of noise. It's and at least the documentary I saw, that it's not cool. It's actually really not pleasant living conditions. So one point of emphasis that I always heard was that the food, at least the food, is okay. And this was something that was supposedly true ever since World War II, that the compensation or to offset life at sea is that the food is good. And so that helps to keep morale up. And so when I heard that the food was really bad, I couldn't believe it, because I know that food is one of those things that you need to be good so that the sailors' morale remain high. And so I thought for a moment, wow, if the food really is bad, then living conditions must be pretty poor on these ships that are deployed over in the Gulf. Well, so it came out that there were at least two maybe three suicide attempts on the Abraham Lincoln. And I think I was listening to Larry Johnson. He was saying that it's probably a lot higher and that is being underreported. So it, basically, things are really bad. And so I started thinking, how did it get so bad? Because it used to be that the Navy was the pride, in addition to Navy pilots. I mean, we all saw Top Gun, but also because I watched documentaries and people would talk about life on board. And clearly, life on an aircraft carrier is a lot better than life on a destroyer. It's a lot more stable, especially in rough seas. It's a little bit more spacious. Although I don't know, 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier. I don't know how much one may be able to get privacy. And I've taken tours on museum ships, and there is no privacy, right? So, 9 months, zero privacy, less than zero privacy on a cramped aircraft carrier. It's got to be miserable. It must be miserable. Um, so clearly things have gotten there's a breakdown in the system somewhere. You go from having food being top notch to being absolutely to be rationed, for bad food to be rationed. It's kind of crazy. But then if you think about it, the whole systemic corruption had to have reached even the ship level. In other words, incompetent people are promoted, and those incompetent people then are in charge of making really important decisions, especially when it comes to logistics and supply, determining how long ships are going to, planning ahead. Okay, if ships are going to be at sea for this long, they need to be resupplied. Maybe they'll be able to stop in at a port, they can resupply that way. But if they can't get to a port, I don't know, like during wartime, then they have to be able to be resupplied by having supply ships. And in World War II, supply ships were critical. They were so important, and supply ships would just cruise up next to a ship, and then they would transfer supplies over. And I believe this is what has been done for hundreds of years. But over the years, because one single aircraft carrier is going to cost $14 billion, and that's not even including the aircraft that's going to be used on the aircraft carrier. So you have so much money going into that. Where's it all going to come from? Well, they're probably going to cut logistics. I can even see it in my head where people are saying, well, where are we going to get the money? Can we cut the spending? Oh, we'll just have the ships do more ports of call so we don't need as many supply ships, right? So supply ships are not as necessary as they were before because now we have bases all over the world, and so they can be resupplied when they enter a port. But in wartime, especially because of the things that have been happening, like I'm pretty sure I talked about how the Gerald Ford had to come home because of a laundry fire. But looking at the pictures, it clearly looked like it's a missile hit, some kind of projectile, because the burn marks are on the outside of the ship, and laundry, I believe, would be more internal. Like it wouldn't be right there on the stern of the ship on the outer part. I mean, there's just so many higher priority uses for that space. Why would it be used for laundry? It just doesn't make any sense. So legit. So you have damaged ships now, so you don't have ships that can take its place and do the rotation. And I've already talked about how many ships of the Navy are under repair, including the nuclear submarine fleet. That like two-thirds of the nuclear submarine fleet is under maintenance right now, because all the money has been redirected to building new ships, maybe for other things that have nothing to do with the basic maintenance of the fleet that exists right now. So logistics, then resupply issues, morale issues, entertainment issues, how to keep the men occupied issues, very, very low priority. And there's no incentive in the leadership to make it a priority, right? Because they're going to get paid, they're still going to get all their money. They're still going to get the promotions, regardless of whether the morale of the sailors are good or bad. And this is the Navy, where they're not engaged in daily combat. So one would imagine what would happen to Marines or to Army soldiers if they landed somewhere. Yeah, they're not going to be resupplied. There's no system in place that will be able to do so. And so all of this, we're going to invade, we're going to take an island. It just really has to be the most irresponsible, out to lunch kind of suggestion to be made. I mean, you can't even supply ships that are in the ocean 1,000 kilometers away from shore. You can't even resupply those. So how do you expect to resupply soldiers who are under fire, who are taking drone strikes? It's just, I don't know. It's so incredible in the most negative way possible, like unbelievably incompetent. But then we shouldn't really be surprised. I mean, from the president who has absolutely no clue how to get out of this war to the intelligence services being overruled by Israeli intelligence, whose agenda is to get and keep the United States in this war. It just boggles the mind, really. It's just so unbelievable that on one hand, I can kind of see why a lot of people refuse to accept that this is a reality and why it is so much easier to believe what Fox News is saying. Um, there was a 20 volume novel naval fiction series that I read, and basically the movie Master and Commander with Russell Crowe is based on this series of books, and it's a very, very accurate naval fiction series. And but it's called the Aubrey Maturin series, and through the books, it tells you that life on the ship is affected by the warrant officers, right? So not the naval officers who command the ship in battle and navigation, but the people who are in charge of supplies, who are in charge of making sure that the ship is under good repair. They are in charge of ordering supplies and all the maintenance materials. They always try to cut corners, right? They always try to take the extras that are left over from long voyages and resell them for profit. So it's in their interest to try to conserve as much as possible to increase how much they can skim off of the top. And everything usually is fine. No one notices until something irregular happens, something beyond the normal, where you're out at sea for a lot longer, then it's discovered that you don't have these reserves that you were supposed to have, that you were paid to acquire for the purpose of the running of the ship. And that's what we're looking at now in the Navy, where most deployments, most operations have been very, very brief, very, very short, where ships were able to pull into a port, refit, give people shore leave, liberty, and then resume their duties. But now the situation is different, and they have to be deployed for much, much longer. And so therefore it's cutting into supplies, and they're not ready for this kind of situation. Now, Larry Johnson said the solution for this is that the government should take over the military hardware and the logistics and all this other kind of stuff, production, manufacturing, because look at what Russia is doing, look at what China did, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the first time I'm actually disagreeing with Larry Johnson. I'm sure that it's more nuanced, that he has probably a more nuanced explanation. But I mean, he has to. because of his breadth and knowledge and awareness of just how things are. So maybe I misunderstood. I don't know. But he said basically that the military should take over production to solve the problems of quantity of ammunition, etc. And he criticized that the military industrial complex is motivated by profit. And so they're going to develop the most expensive systems. And so then you're going to run into ammunition quantity problems. But the problem was that, private industry as such, also, the way that it's done has always suffered under lots of problems. I just mentioned it in the Aubrey Maturin fictional series, but also when you look at World War II, which is supposed to be the height of US industry and whatnot, they bought a lot of planes, tanks, equipment that were not good at all. So the B-24 Liberator, four-engine heavy bomber, would be a perfect example. Like I used to love that plane, and then people started telling me that it was a heavily flawed plane. It was a crappy plane, which is why it wasn't used as much. The B-17, much better plane. But so why were they even bought if they were so bad? Why, if they were so poorly constructed, if they were so unreliable? If you watch the movie Unbroken, they were riding in a B-24 when it crashed because of so many flaws of that bomber. The Sherman tank was not even really that good. You needed five of them, maybe, to be able to defeat one Tiger tank, right? So, these systems weren't all that great, but they were able to make them in large quantity. Now, the question is, who did they beat out? What were the other designs that were rejected in favor of these designs, which weren't really all that great? And so, in other words, what I'm implying here, now going to spell out, is that there is a lot of politicking. There's a lot of lobbying, right? I'm sure that Consolidated, which was the company that built the B-24, they probably lobbied heavily so that they can get a contract so that their business can make some money producing bombers that were really not that great. Okay, and the same with the Sherman tank, I'm sure. So, but winning covers many sins. So the post-war hype, hey, we won and we did it with the Sherman tank. We did it with all of the great equipment we had, including the B-24 bomber, which was really not that good. So winning covers a lot of sins. So a lot of problems that existed in the military, whether it's logistical or equipment related, is covered over because of the ultimate victory. And even if the military took over, nothing would change. Nothing would change if the military was directly in charge of appropriation and buying and all the other contract stuff. I'm sure they were taken out of the military hands for the same problem, right? And it's because the same people who's in charge of military strategy now will be in charge of determining which systems to employ. So that's not the solution. That's what I disagree with Larry Johnson. I don't think the military should, that's not the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem to me is that the budget is bloated. There's just too much money there. And so if all the money was stripped away, then you couldn't have and you couldn't build an offensive military, a military that's designed to project power. That's what the aircraft carrier is all about. It's not about defense. And so if the military was stripped down to defense, primarily defense, then you would have a lot of competing contractors to putting in bids to create the best defensive systems, and this to be most efficient, most cheap, right? Just like Iran. I mean, think about it. If there was a growing military threat overseas, and you really believe that they could threaten the United States, well, then you develop a system to specifically designed to undermine whatever offensive capability that country was going to develop. There you have it. And so you just have to put a priority on knowing what other countries are up to and then develop counter systems. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way. That's what Iran did, which is why it only has to spend a fraction of what the United States is spending. And so the size of the military budget, that's the problem. Because in that big, ginormous budget, which is only the budget that's on the books, but there's a black budget, right? You don't, no questions are allowed to be asked about budget, unaccountable, intransparent budget. That's the problem, right? So there's so much lack of accountability. There's no accounting, right? And you've heard the stories how people have tried to audit the Pentagon and you can't, right? So they'll say national security issues, whatever. But basically, it's more the reason is that they don't know where all the money is going. During the not just the Gulf War, Afghanistan, but during the Gulf War, Afghanistan, there were pallets of $100 bills, pallets. Okay. And so I think like $1 billion of $100 bills being loaded up into planes to buy off people in Iraq and Afghanistan. And some of them go missing, you see. And so that is also part of the black budget, just bribing entire countries to try to do and fall in line with whatever foreign policy the United States wants to come up with. And when you have that much money sloshing around, you know that there is a tremendous amount of waste, and no one wants to stop that cash cow. And so the real fundamental problem is the huge budget. And if you slash all that and really only have defense, not Department of Offensive War, but a true Department of Defense, then this then you'll see a lot of these problems go away. It would only be the absolutely necessary um, programs will be maintained. So the A-10, what do you call the A-10 ground support plane would be also gotten rid of. It's way beyond its service life, and there is no replacement. And so this is the problem with having a massive budget like this. There's no foresight, there's no planning for the future. There's just the assumption that nothing will ever change. In other words, we're still fighting a 20th century war. Also, the size of the contracts, because of the size of the budget, means that some companies will entertain the option of causing accidents for other companies, right? Because so much money is at stake. It is worth it to hire people to cause accidents for other people. I mean, I don't think it's impossible to believe that that would happen. I think it happens all the time right now, as it is. So here's the evaluation. Here's the conclusion. Talk is cheap, right? Oh, we've got the best military. Talk is cheap. So I'm going to give you a quote from Thomas Sowell. It's hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. Basically, I'm talking about sovereign immunity, right? Sovereign immunity defined shields officials, politicians, and bureaucrats from constant litigation, allowing public servants to make difficult policy decisions without fear of personal or state liability. In other words, I can make stupid decisions and not feel any penalty, not suffer any consequences as a result of stupid policy choices. So politicians can pursue illegal endeavors, even engage in the most corrupt activity without fear of repercussion. And remember, a couple of days ago, I talked about Lord Acton and how he pushes against this, that politicians, bureaucrats, and leaders in the church must be held to a higher standard, not be immune for any kind of reprisal or litigation, but rather they should be scrutinized much, much more simply because of that. Their choices affect so many other people, and they should have to feel the pain, the consequences, the negative outcomes of the choices that they put in place. And so the fact that sailors are attempting suicide, I guarantee that maybe aside from one or two people in Congress, no one cares. They take that position of, fake news. Even the Democrats. I would even go so far as to say the Democrats don't care either, because right now it is not in their interest to talk about it now, right? When they're back in power, oh yeah, they're going to talk about it all the time. So it's not that they actually care, but it's what can they use against their political enemies. But here's the thing: Democrats and Republicans are both guilty, guilty, guilty of irresponsible policies. And it's so evil when people say, just like Colonel Wilkerson said, it's what they signed up to do, and so we can use them, we can abuse them, we can send them to their deaths. It's what they signed up to do. It is so evil because what people who say that miss, what they forget is that there was a trust. The people who signed up trusted that the people who would give them orders would have their back, that they would not be abused. They would not be used as pawns. They would not be used as triggers or bait for, false flags or any of this stuff, that someone will support them, back them up, look into and make decisions in their best interest. But clearly, this has all been a lie. It's fake. Their trust has been violated. And this is what upsets me so much, which is why it's like the way you avoid this is you always move for peace. Coups d'etats are led by soldiers, colonels, right? Because the general rank, full colonel, generals, they're political ranks when you're in peacetime. And so coups d'etats are led by soldiers because they've been so abused for so long by the very people who are making their lives miserable. Uh, so the politicians and bureaucrats, and not just on the federal level, but on the state and local level as well, they must be held accountable. If we think back and remember all those stuff that happened during the lockdowns and how vicious and just evil people became so quickly and so easily, that's why there has to be accountability, because it's going to happen again. And it's going to be much, much worse the next time it happens. The rise of social democrats, of communism in this country is insane. You give them power and they will not hesitate. I know it. I see it in their eyes. They will not hesitate with a smile lock people up because they disagree with them. I made a post this morning about how, all the things that I was saying during the lockdowns turn out to be true. And yet, all these people who gave me a lot of crap during the lockdowns, not a single one of them has apologized or said, you were right, I was wrong. Not a single one. And instead, they just pretend nothing is happening. It's insane. People have lost their minds. People who I thought were intelligent have somehow managed to create these walls in their mind to ignore everything that might undermine, the validity of the arguments that they have in their head. And so people must be made to consider the consequences of their policies, of their choices, of their decisions, not just in government, but also in everyday life. Welfare and social programs, government subsidies, these are all things which take away responsibility and accountability for the average person as well. So government as a whole just creates a horrible, horrible society. Um, and unless people figure this out, things are going to get much, much worse. My only personal comfort, is that we all eventually get what we get. We get what's coming to us. And, you know, I just hope that the right people or the proper people get punished, and for everyone to see, to serve as a lesson to everybody else that this is unsustainable. We cannot live this way, and we have to get back to, um, just seeking to improve our own lives, leaving other people alone, and protecting the basic freedoms that all people should enjoy, our inalienable rights. That's it for today. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next time.